Avery, if you don't mind starting that now, thank you. You are here for the Restorative Justice Grant Advisory Committee meeting. Today's goal is to review applications received for gap funding for the grantees with the hopes of getting the existing grantees funded for one additional year through June 30th of 2025. We only have 55 minutes, so I want to be very mindful of time, and I'm going to be reminding our committee members of the time throughout just to make sure we're keeping on pace. But this is our anticipated meeting schedule. We will go ahead and take a formal roll call just to confirm quorum one more time. And Avery has kindly offered to help me confirm quorum just by counting, as we get through all the voice votes later. But as a courtesy, if you are a committee member and you need to leave for any reason, please raise your hand or unmute and make it known so that we are not guessing where you have gone. Let's see. Let's go ahead and take roll now. Avery, do you mind leading the charge on that?
Yeah, of course. Tristan Edwards.
Present.
Aaron Knott. I see Aaron's here, yeah, but I can't quite hear.
How about now?
Yes, perfect, thank you. Shannon Wilson.
Present.
Carrie Naughton. Vanessa Timmons.
Present.
Ashley Beatty. Simon Fulford.
Present.
Elaine Walters.
Present.
Jimena Ospina Todd.
Present.
Michael Kaiser. And Kathleen Meehan Coop.
Present.
Wonderful. We have quorum, Casey.
Thanks, Avery, and thank you, committee members, for being here. All right, so we got through roll. Next up will be a quick pause for public comment. We have 5 minutes scheduled, but I will shorten that a bit if there doesn't seem to be anyone popping on. We don't need to reserve the full 5 minutes. Then we will hop into your review and approval of any RJ gap funding requests, and then discuss next steps, hopefully wrapping up just before 9. And I guess for the record, sorry about that. My name is Casey Beck. I am the Behavioral Health Program Manager here at the Criminal Justice Commission. And as a reminder, we are recording this meeting. We have disabled the chat so that all comments, especially in review of applications from committee members, can be captured for the record. Okay, go ahead and try to navigate forward here. I'm having a little trouble with my mouse. There we go. Do any members of the public that are tuning in today wish to speak? If so, feel free to take yourselves off mute or use the raised hand function. We will try to keep comments to less than 2 minutes if possible, but now is your time should you wish to speak. All right. Well, in the interest of time then, we will move forward. The last time we met, we did an overview of Grant Advisory Committee roles and responsibilities. To save time today, I'm not going to be reviewing that again. I hope that if you weren't able to tune in last time, you were able to review that slide. And instead, what I will be reviewing is what you're doing here today. So back in April, you all decided to allocate up to $3 million of the new funding, which totaled $4 million, to prioritize efforts for existing programs to maintain their current operations, including bringing programs into a full pilot or operation mode, had they been in some sort of planning stage prior. You also allocated at least $1 million of that total $4 million available funding to open either 6 or 9-month planning grant opportunities for new applicants. All this money has to be out the door by June 30th of 2025, just about a year from now. And today, the reason you're here is to review the gap funding applications that we received from the existing 7 grantees and to make those award decisions, as well as discuss remaining funding for planning grants and maybe even possible supplemental funding for existing grantees. A very quick review of your role here in the middle column. Your roles are to evaluate applications, discuss them collaboratively, and then you approve which applications are being sent to the commission for the commission to decide to authorize that funding. The commission is the body that makes the ultimate funding decisions on the applications that have been approved by you all. In terms of process, grantees, took into account their carryover funding, any funding that they would be, left remaining to spend past the June 30th of this year, which is the end of their current project period. So we were asking them as part of their application to indicate whether they were interested in extending their project for another year. Everyone was. And then to consider those unspent funds that they would be carrying into their gap funding year to deduct that from their request, as well as to upload a budget sheet and identify which aspects of their program that this gap funding would support. All committee members received those applications and a link to those budget sheets prior to this meeting, so if you had a chance to review. For each line item in those budget sheets, we asked grantees to indicate, was it an existing line item? And that means that it was previously approved by this grant advisory committee and the commission, either as part of their original application or maybe an amendment request along the way in the past 2 years. We also noted any funding requests for expansion of programming or changing of scope so that those could be flagged for you all to consider. My staff here at CJC, this amazing team, conducted a quick review and completed outreach where needed to clarify anything. And then on the next slides, what I'm going to do is present an overview of all requests. And then on each remaining slide, we'll go grantee by grantee in alphabetical order, presenting their total request, whether or not they are wanting to just maintain current operations or to convert to an operational or actual pilot year of their program, or if in their budget line items our staff flagged that they're hoping to expand or maybe change or alter their program slightly. We will then review any newly requested line items that you can consider whether or not it meets their program's goals. We will not be going line item by line item through every budget. We simply do not have time, but wanted to, know that we really trusted the grantees to estimate their carryover, to identify their needs, and to make those known. So as a reminder, this committee allocated up to $3 million to this gap funding opportunity for existing grantees, and the total requests came in just over 2.6 million. So there is plenty of funding available. It does not have to be kind of these competitive cuts that we have had to do and go through in the past. But as an overview here, you can see that all 7 grantees requested a project period extension for an additional year through June 30th of 2025. Excuse me. They also all requested additional funding of some sort. 2 programs requested to convert from their planning phase to an operational phase. So be it a pilot or like they are finished with their pilot and they're ready to roll full operation. 2 programs requested kind of expansion and change of scope, perhaps, to their existing operations for your consideration. And the remaining programs just requested to maintain what they are currently doing for an additional year. So this is the overview of requests. Again, 2.6 million and change, coming in under that total 3 million ask. And into application review, we've got 45 minutes. So first, again, in alphabetical order, the Center for Dialogue and Resolution, they are requesting an extension of their project period for an additional year and additional funding in the amount of $405,908 to maintain their current operations. Overall, this does not include any new services, personnel, or any sort of new operational costs. They did some, kind of streamlining of positions along with their request, going from maybe 3.7 FTE to 3.5 FTE, and slight raises, etc., but no new things. Are there any questions or discussion about CDR's request? Yeah, Elaine.
Is it possible for you to kind of summarize what the amount of the carryover was from the?
Yeah, and actually, no, just because we did not ask grantees to give us that calculation, we simply said, we trust you grantees, take that into consideration as you calculate your requests.
Right, okay.
Tristan.
Well, I guess just no questions, just in terms of discussion. I think that this is a great application. I think that the staffing request is appropriate. My main thing is I would love to see in the future additional staffing and a reduction in the reliance on volunteers. So hopefully next time this grant comes back with a higher request. I also really appreciated that they have a social support coordinator as opposed to a case manager, because I think that that language can sometimes be triggering for people who may associate it with more kind of like system-based services. The training seemed really great. It's always really great to have a fund that is available for direct client support. And I really also love that they're sending folks to the national conference. So yeah, I just thought it was a great application. I think it's a great program, and yeah, I support what they're doing and their request.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Tristan, for your comments. It, should later in this discussion, when talking about the remaining funding, if there were to be a decision to allow for a supplemental round, maybe those comments about, hoping for more personnel and less volunteers, would be a strategic way to kind of evaluate that competitively as a grant advisory committee. If there are no further questions or discussion, we'll go ahead and proceed to the vote. We're going to incorporate voice voting just so we don't have to call roll every single time. So what I'm going to do is just once again confirm quorum with Avery. So one moment.
Actually, can I ask just one quick question?
Yes, Kathleen.
Do we know how many cases or how many people they're hoping to put through the program?
Off the top of my head, I do not have that number.
Okay.
I can ask my colleagues, Rima, maybe. Do we know if we have that handy?
Oh, I see it here. Never mind. I misread my own note. Sorry.
Oh, no worries. Okay.
And Casey, yes, we have quorum.
Thank you, Avery. Okay, so what I'm going to do is state, what the decision is. Then I will pause and ask if there are any abstentions. Remember, if you have an actual or potential conflict, you're welcome to abstain from voting, and we still will have quorum. And then I will proceed to ask for all those in favor and those opposed. And you'll just say aye if you're in favor, and opposed will say nay, and we'll note down who's who. Are there any questions about that voice voting process before we move forward? Okay, thank you. Okay, so proceeding to the vote, the decision before you now is whether or not you approve the gap funding request that is before you from the Center for Dialogue and Resolution Incorporated. as presented on this slide. So here I will go ahead and ask for those who abstain, those in favor, and those opposed. Are there any abstentions? Okay, not seeing any. All those in favor of approving this gap funding request from the Center for Dialogue and Resolution Incorporated, please say aye.
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 Great. Those opposed, please say nay. Okay, then we move forward with approval. On to the next application. We have 6 left and 40 minutes. Okay, so Conflict Artistry, as shown here, they are requesting an extension of their project period for an additional year through June 30th of 2025 and additional funding to maintain their current operations, but also to include a few new line items and notable growth to some of the services that they've been providing. So for that reason, staff at the CJC have flagged this just as an expansion request because of that significant notable growth in some of the services that they're providing and the few new line items. So their total request came in at $399,078. The program was already providing services, in the area of juvenile justice and consent violations, but they've identified a need to really grow capacity to better meet the needs of the community that they're serving. And so you can see the new line items listed out here. For the sake of time, I'm not going to go ahead and read through all of them, but we will pause just as for a moment for you all to review and react. I will open it up to discussion from the committee members or any questions.
Simon here, just a super quick. Is the Youth Restorative Justice, is that for an FTE? It doesn't, or is that, I haven't looked at the details, but just.
Yeah, so that line item specifically, the Youth Restorative Justice at $60,000 is a contract for a consultant to assist in school-centered partnership development and case management.
Awesome.
I had a couple comments on this application. I like that all of the employees are full-time and dedicated to the work. I saw that they all were spending 100% of their time on the program development, which was different from some other applications. So I thought that was really good. I also think that having a sexual violence coordinator is really important. One of the things that we've seen at RJCO is a lot of the requests that come through for assistance on cases have to do with that topic area. So I think that that's really appropriate. I appreciated that they built in funding to pay for volunteers and for community members that are involved in the support circles. Really love that they're getting data support. I think that that's really important for all of the programs. And I thought that the budget was very thorough and that all of the training and office costs sounded very reasonable.
Are there any other questions or comments from committee members before moving on to the voice vote? Right, I'm not hearing any. Avery, can we please confirm quorum?
We have quorum.
Thank you. So the decision before you now is whether or not you approve the gap funding request as displayed here on the slide from Conflict Artistry, LLC. Here I'll proceed to ask for those who abstain, those in favor, and those opposed. So first, are there any abstentions?
Yes, I'm abstaining.
Thank you, and that was Elaine? Okay. Thank you for noting that, Elaine. So all those in favor of approving the gap funding request from Conflict Artistry, please say aye.
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 Right. And those opposed, please say nay. Not seeing or hearing any, so it passes. Thank you, and moving on to the next All right, so the Deschutes County District Attorney's Office Emerging Adult Program are requesting an extension of project period through June 30th of 2025, as well as additional funding in the amount of $252,872 to maintain their current operations, including one new line item for RJCO support. But we didn't feel like it was significant enough to flag as an expansion of programming. But you'll see that new line item here in the amount of $8,000. I will go ahead and open it up to committee members for discussion and any questions. Elaine.
Yeah, I just appreciated the way the program showed all of the things that they're doing that are also outside of the money that they're requesting. So I really appreciated how much money they're putting into restitution funds, and some stabilization funds that they've got some sustainability outside of this project funding showing up, and I appreciate that. And I also just appreciate seeing a more full picture of all the things that they're doing by doing that in the budget. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I would echo that. I thought that the budget was very thorough and gave really detailed explanations, which was really helpful. Also noted that, the restitution fund, stabilization fund, in efforts to get an external evaluation were all things that I thought were really positive. I would note, this program is probably the most kind of system-based and least community-based, which is not a requirement of this grant. But, I just recall when we reviewed this grant several years back during the first round of grant applications, there was a lot of comment on the desire to kind of see that shift from being really rooted in the DA's office to being more rooted in the community-based organization. And I had honestly hoped to see more of that in this application. I think that probably the easiest way to accomplish at least some movement towards that is to have the victim advocate based out of the community-based organization, which just seemed like it would be more appropriate when we think about, things like Brady and the different priorities that exist within the state and prosecution office. I know that the community-based organization is really strong and providing really awesome services, and I know that the program as a whole is moving in a really great direction. And so this is all to say that I would approve this amount, and that in future years, when hopefully this grant becomes more competitive, I would also want to see movement more towards being a more community-centered program.
Thanks for the comments, Tristan and Elaine. Are there any other discussion points or questions from committee members before we proceed to the voice vote?
I want to add, Jimena here from Latino Network, that I really appreciate although not sufficient, it is significant amount for client assistance dollars. I think it reflects the great need in community. However, seeing the bulk of cases, 40 grand for client assistance is not enough, but I think in all of the applications, this one is the one that has one of the largest amounts for client assistance. So it's significant, it's not enough. I appreciate that it demonstrates that these funds are needed to do this type of work. So
thank you, Jimena. All right, so we will now proceed to the vote. The decision before you now is whether or not you approve the gap funding request from the Deschutes County District Attorney's Office Emerging Adult Program that is displayed here on this slide. So I will proceed to ask for those who abstain, those in favor, and those opposed. Are there any abstentions?
This is Kathleen, and I'll be abstaining.
Thank you, Kathleen. I have that noted down. Right, not seeing any other abstentions. So all those in favor, please say aye. Oh, shoot. Sorry, guys. I need to confirm quorum with Avery.
we have quorum.
Thank you, Avery. Okay, now all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Thank you. Those opposed, please say nay. All right, the gap funding request passes. On to the next. We have about 30 minutes left. All right, so Insight Alliance Restorative Roots Project are requesting an extension of project period for an additional year through June 30th of 2025 and additional funding to maintain their current operations, including the consolidation of all the services that they're currently providing into one contract and very slightly expanding their scope of work. So for that reason, CJC and actually Insight Alliance flagged this as an expansion request. The main takeaway here is that Insight Alliance is requesting to move their program to one consolidated contract with the Restorative Roots Project. Restorative Roots Project is currently doing all of the RJ work within the Insight Alliance, and they intend to continue to do all that work and then just add some, expand their scope of work to provide community circles for harmed and responsible parties, provide an art reinvestment project for BIPOC individuals in the program, and to take on juvenile cases. You'll note that we have, the new line item listed here in the amount of $749,200. Their total request is $786,670. The difference there is just administrative costs. And, I guess I will go ahead and turn it over to the Grant Advisory Committee for discussion and questions.
Yeah, this Simon, really not any, well, just to clear, my understanding is, as you've just said, although it's a new line item, it's more of a kind of, I guess, contractual change. It's the same team of RJ coordinators and facilitators. It's the same team doing the work. It's just been some sort of changes in the structure of the relationship between the Insight Alliance and that team that are doing that. So I don't feel it doesn't have any material impact on the quality of the work. That's
correct, Simon. Yeah, thank you for that clarification. In fact, normally, I guess in CJC grant world, some of these consolidations of contracts wouldn't even be brought to your attention, but because it's nearly the entire award, we just wanted to make sure that it was clear for the record and clear for committee members of that change. But yeah, no substantive changes in programming except for a bit of expansion. Elaine, I think you had your hand up next.
I do. I understand the procedural part of this and the contractual change. What I can't see on the budget, though, is where the money's going. I mean, I can look at the previous budget, but it makes it so that it's not clear what the funds are being used for directly. And so should I just accept at face value that it's sort of going to the same budget structure that was in play before?
That's a great question. So 2 notes on that. First, Insight Alliance and Restorative Roots Project asked the CJC if we would like that detail. So they offered. However, internally, it's not our process to monitor subcontracts. That gets to be incredibly tedious, especially when you can consider that a grantee could have multiple subcontracts. So we just confirmed with Restorative Roots Project and Insight Alliance as a whole that the stuff that was in the original budget, that basically Insight Alliance was doing, was still continuing as part of that line item that's all consolidated now. So I would say that as a reviewer of these applications, you could feel confident in taking it at face value that line item represents everything that existed in the previous budget, just all consolidated into one, and really just due to subcontracting and our internal policy at CJC, they offered to give full detail, and we said, oh, no, thank you.
So then just to follow up to that, in terms of reporting and looking at statistics and, the kinds of funds that we just saw in the other project where it was outlined what they were sort of putting in the bucket for for client services and stabilization and those kinds of things. Will that show up somewhere in a future report? You know, how many people they saw, how they spent their funds? Where does that become public information that we will ultimately have access to?
Over the next 4 quarters, so the remaining of the grant, they would be required to submit expenditure reports to the CJC as all other grantees. However, they would only be required to say how much money of that line item has been spent. So no further detail. However, we have a great relationship with the folks at Restorative Roots Project and Inside Alliance. We certainly could inquire and request that they include a bit of narrative of, specifically, hey, of this amount, the amount that was spent in this quarter, this amount went here, this amount went there. I know that they would be happy to provide that. And moving forward, I anticipate that should this grant get more money and we open up a new opportunity for everyone to reapply competitively, I believe Restorative Roots Project would be applying all on their own. And they would then have, the full budget as you anticipate in your head for future grant purposes. So for the next 4 quarters, one line item, we can definitely ask for more detail. I'm sure they would be happy to provide it. Are there any other?
Yeah, this is Shannon Wilson. I just want to echo Elaine's point because I think it's just best practice to have as much information throughout the entire process. And so I would encourage you to maybe take them up on their offer to get you the information, even if it's not something that the CJC can actively track, just for transparency and reporting, and to advocate for the funding to continue, like all of the partners here, to support that. Having that granular information, it can be really, really helpful to justify the need and to advocate for more resources for that need. So I would just encourage that as well. I support what Elaine said. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Shannon. Appreciate that. Really what this consolidation was some, basically the only way that this project could continue was to consolidate this contract or to end. So they chose to continue to provide these services with this kind of subcontract for this interim 4-quarter period, so that they didn't have to end what they were doing or wait 4 quarters of no funding to then hopefully have a chance to apply competitively next time. So we definitely are happy to have them kind of elaborate on their spending in the coming 4 quarters, share that with you all. And in terms of transparency, I definitely can see the value in that, Shannon and Elaine. So thank you for pointing it out. Are there any other questions or points of discussion from the committee members? Great. I'll go ahead and have Avery confirm quorum now.
We have quorum.
Thank you. And we will proceed to the vote. So the decision before you now is whether or not you approve the gap funding request from the Inside Alliance Restorative Roots Project that's presented to you on this slide right here. Here I'll go ahead and proceed to ask for those who abstain, those in favor, and those opposed. Are there any abstentions?
Aaron abstains.
Oh, and I'm abstaining as well. This is Tristan.
I heard Tristan, and then there was one other voice. Sorry, I was looking down.
That was Aaron.
Aaron Knott, thank you so much. All right. Those in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay. And those opposed, please say nay. Okay, the gap funding request for the Inside Alliance Restorative Roots Project passes. Moving on to the next, we have about 20 minutes left, so just want to be mindful of time as we move forward here. Lutheran Community Services Northwest is requesting an extension of their project period for an additional year through June 30th of 2025, and additional funding to maintain their current operations in the amount of $540,128. They had a few new line items, including some increases in FTE, some volunteer recognition, et cetera. Those are outlined for you here on the slide. But we didn't flag it as an expansion, just due to it wasn't a huge change in scope. I will turn it over now to committee members for discussion or to ask any questions.
Well, I guess I can just provide my comments on the request. I really, really like that they're adding a community and systems outreach liaison. I think one of the primary issues that a lot of these programs have faced because of the lack of familiarity with restorative justice, I mean, in the public, but across systems, is just doing that outreach and making sure that people are aware and getting bought into these concepts. And so as all of these programs develop, I've seen that as something that's really important as a need, and I'm really glad that they're dedicating a staff member to that position. All of the other staffing seems appropriate. They have 2 dedicated facilitator positions, which I think is great. And I liked that they wove in some interpretation costs. And it's good to see that they're planning to do kind of like a volunteer recognition gathering. Would love to see stipends for volunteers, or even better, moving away from a volunteer model and bringing on more paid facilitators. And I liked that they had like a consultation and training cost. It just seemed a little low to me. But other than that, yeah, I thought it was a great application.
So I actually had a couple questions. I was under the impression, and maybe my knowledge on this is inaccurate, but I was under the impression that we couldn't use any funds for food and those types of things. Am I incorrect on that?
Per the grant administration guide, yeah, that should be an unallowable. Rima or Avery, are you able to take a look into the budget? Was that specific to the volunteer recognition, I'm assuming? Or maybe Kathleen, do you mind pointing out where you saw that?
Yeah, so I guess maybe you've potentially partially answered the question. So one of them was volunteer recognition. So are you allowed to have food for volunteer recognition?
Yeah, I would say it's normally a disallowed.
It's disallowed.
Yeah,
Okay, that's what I thought. And so, yeah, there was a mention here about snacks for trainings and volunteers, and then food specifically for the volunteer recognition. I'm looking for the line item, my notes. Under supplies, line item 1, and then and this isn't to say that I'm happy with the concept that we aren't allowed to use money for food. I think it's a real disadvantage and a huge inconvenience as I pull money out of my own pocket to buy snacks for our meetings. But I wanted just to note that from the standpoint, I don't want anybody to get something and then end up having issues later on.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you bringing it up. Our staff is looking into this as well.
Okay.
What we're looking into specifically right now is our thought that it actually was a previously approved exception, and not a new request. And so, okay, yes, we have confirmed it was a previously approved exception. So the grant advisory committee in the past had probably muddled over this and decided to approve this exception. But thank you for bringing that up, Kathleen. And yeah, we'll continue to take that feedback back to CJC as far as grant programs go. It's not the first time that we've heard this. It's more just a federal guideline that we follow. So, but food's always welcome. I love food. Are there any other questions or points of discussion from committee members at this time? Okay, then we will go ahead and proceed to the voice vote. Avery, could you please confirm quorum?
We have quorum.
Thank you. There are no further questions or discussion. The decision before you now is whether or not to approve the gap funding requests from Lutheran Community Services Northwest as displayed here on the slide. I'll proceed to ask for those who abstain, those in favor, and those opposed. Are there any abstentions? Not hearing or seeing any. So all those in favor of approving this gap funding request from Lutheran Community Services Northwest, please say aye.
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 All right, those opposed, please say nay. Okay, the request passes. We're moving forward. For grant advisory committee members, just to note, there are 2 whole applications left. We have 15 minutes. There are still other agenda items to be noted, so just a time check. We're running about 5 minutes over right now. The request here on the slide is from the Resolve Center for Dispute Resolution and Restorative Justice. They're requesting an extension of project period through June 30th, 2025, and additional funding to not only maintain their current operations, but to take their current operations from their planning program to become fully operational. So their total request is $124,500. No new line items. They'll be doing all the same, wonderful programming that they have been doing. They're just ready to hit the pavement. I will turn it over to the committee members now for discussion or to ask any questions.
I noticed that most of the funding is going to personnel costs, which I think is a really positive thing. This is another one of those applications where all of the positions are 100% dedicated to the program. And yeah, just really excited to see them launch their new emerging adult program and continue what they've been up to.
Yeah, Elaine.
Yeah, I also like this application. I love that it's moving to full operation. I also think it's a pretty modest budget, compared to some of the others, and also am hoping that what that reflects is that there is other structure in place to support the work that's happening, including materials and supplies and admin and all of that. So just really appreciate the work that's going into this community, and want to make sure that it stays well supported.
Thanks for your comments, Elaine and Tristan.
Jimena here. Also, my only comments is in terms of how perhaps so short, maybe where are they paying staff? Are they reimbursing staff for mileage, travels, and all of that? So more questions, because it feels very modest on trainings. What are they including? Trainings, professional development? How are they sustaining their staff and keeping them happy as they hire them and invest in them? So I really like it. It's full time. It looks full time, sustaining, supporting the program, staying, but also sustainability of staff and keeping people in the program when they have them, right? So are they reimbursing folks for mileage, parking, all of those things that we need to make sure happens in our programs as well?
Yeah, thanks, Jimena, for those additional comments. I've noted those questions down. Again, kind of noting all these questions down as maybe something the advisory committee can come back to should competitive requests be a permissible thing in the future. But thank you for stating so for the record. I appreciate you guys bringing that up. All right, if there's no further discussion or questions, we'll go ahead and proceed to the vote. Avery, could you please confirm quorum?
We have quorum.
Thank you. So the decision before you now is whether or not you approve the gap funding request from Resolve Center for Dispute Resolution and Restorative Justice as displayed on this slide. Here, I'll proceed to ask for those who abstain, those in favor, and those opposed. Are there any abstentions? Seeing or hearing any, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Great, thank you. Those in opposed, please say nay. Not hearing any, so the gap funding request is approved. Moving on to the final gap funding request from Six Rivers Dispute Resolution Center. We have 10 minutes left. Let's see, so Six Rivers is requesting an extension of their project period and additional funding to maintain their current operations, including conversion of their planning program to become an operational pilot program. So as such, their needs have changed slightly because of the full operation. Their total request is outlined here in the amount of $178,500. They have a couple new line items noted for interpretation services and behavioral health services. I will go ahead and turn it over to committee members now for discussion or to ask any questions.
No, not any question from me, just to say this has been an exceptionally well-planned development of this programming, tackling some, both the community engagement side has been, I think really excellent and is a great demonstration model for other communities and other programs to follow if when they're setting up new programs. And then also the types of cases that they're seeking to tackle and the partnerships they've formed. And then maybe a little bit like the Resolve one is, making sure that they're actually asking for enough funding to really get the impact they want in the community, and making sure they're compensating, remunerating their staff and community partners in, as much as they can and should. So.
Noted. Thank you so much, Simon. Elaine, I see your hands up.
Yeah, I agree with what was just shared, and I also really appreciate the new line item additions as well. Adding those two components is really a clear indicator to me of what they're responding to and what their needs are, and I appreciate seeing it here.
Yeah, it's always really exciting to see a program go from planning period to operational. And I've been really impressed with the work that Six Rivers is doing, and just echo what Elaine and Simon had to say.
Thank you all. Are there any other points of discussion or questions from committee members before we proceed to a voice vote? Right, not seeing or hearing any. Avery, could you please confirm quorum one last time?
We have quorum.
Fantastic. So without further discussion, we'll go ahead and proceed to the vote. The decision before you now is whether or not you approve the gap funding request from Six Rivers Dispute Resolution Center as displayed here on this slide. I'll proceed to ask for those who abstain, those in favor, and those opposed. Are there any abstentions? Seeing or hearing any. So those in favor of approving the gap funding request from Six Rivers, please say aye.
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 Thank you. Those opposed, say nay. Right, so the gap funding request for Six Rivers passes. Committee members, you have finally made it through the gap funding applications for this round. Thank you for your review and attention and thoughtful comments and questions. We have about 7 minutes left of the meeting. I wanted to quickly, discuss kind of next steps and remaining funding and such. So as noted, your role here today was to approve these applications after, doing a thorough review. So thank you for doing that. I will then take these to the Criminal Justice Commission meeting next Wednesday, the 26th, for their decision in authorizing that funding for the approved applications. So they really rely on your work in all that review and discussion. So again, thank you for doing so so thoughtfully. And we will be updating grantees, of course, of the decisions that were made here today, informing them of next steps in terms of commission authorization. And then after that commission meeting, we'll be sure to follow up with committee members and grantees to let them, everyone know what exactly went down at the commission meeting so that we're all on the same page of how to move forward. But the good news is that this is extension of programming for an additional year through June 30th of 2025. And the other news is that there's some remaining funding. So there's no action required of you all regarding this remaining funding. But I really wanted to just make sure everyone's on the same page and understanding what it is, and then provide you an opportunity to offer any input or feedback for the commission to consider next week. So there is about 1.3 million left, which is 312,000 above that 1 million allocation that you recommended for the 6 or 9 month planning grants. We are going to be initiating tribal consultation because this is a critical event that's been triggered. Basically, new funding means critical event. We want to make sure that all tribes in Oregon are aware of the opportunity. That process does take time. And so that 6 or 9 month isn't really set in stone quite yet in terms of which one. But know that we are going to be initiating tribal consultation as soon as possible. And really wanted to, I guess, ask for your input on whether you would think about a supplemental funding round for current grantees for that maybe $312,000 and change or another portion. So you've got this, 1 year project period, which means that we kind of are going to do either 6 or 9 month planning grants so that we have an opportunity to create a solicitation for new planning grantees, have a review process, have you all make decisions, have the commission authorize the funding. So that's the reason it can't be for 1 full year. But then an opportunity maybe for supplemental funding for existing programs. With the very few minutes left, I'll turn it over to you all.
I'm going to jump right in. I'd like to strongly advocate that existing programs can have the opportunity to come back for some supplemental funding. A number of the grant committee members raised some questions, some questions and good advice. Have they thought enough about remuneration of volunteers or community partners and things like that? Sometimes we limit ourselves when we're putting in proposals. A number of discussions were held also about the kind of technical support, planning support, data support that RJCO has provided and would like to do more of. And some in the supplemental round of funding in the previous grant, organizations put in a line item for RJ's code's technical support, and that some continued that this time and others didn't, and so maybe it's to encourage that they could consider that. And then I think doing new project planning, I would advocate that we build in the CJC, or there's some flexibility of whether that's $1 million, if the supplemental requests go a little bit over the kind of balance up to that 3 million, that doesn't get cut off. I think it'll still be really hard for planning grants for organizations to bid for even $1 million on a 6-month period. And I wouldn't want us to sort of leave allocated funding from the state, as it were, unspent. So making sure we have enough flexibility in the rules to recreate about, supplemental and new grant funding.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. I'll note real quick that I think that is a possibility. It is up to the commission to decide what to do with that unallocated funding, but an opportunity could exist in which maybe 1.3 million in total is open to both existing grantees and new planning grantees, and then you all review them competitively. That's an option. I'm seeing the order of hands here is Elaine next. I do know that we're getting very close. If you have to go, that's okay, but Elaine.
So similar to Simon, I agree that we need to set it up so at least folks would have access to getting the supplemental funding in the ways that have been mentioned earlier. I also would like to see us, based on the experience of the work that's been happening, develop some ideas for what we think sort of some ideal additional planning grants. I mean, I could only, 1 or 2 or 3 is really all we're going to be able to fund. And so having those meet criteria based on some of what we've learned this round would be great to think about. And I don't really know how to split the pot, so I'll leave that to other people to think about differently.
Thanks, Elaine. Tristan, your hand was up next.
Yeah, I think Simon touched on this, but even if we get 3 or 4 planning grants, I would expect those to be in the realm of 100 to 200,000. And so I think that even if we have 4 new planning grants, we're still going to come under that $1 million. And so having a process where, the current grantees can apply as well, we can prioritize the planning grants. But allow everyone to kind of take another bite at the apple so that, yeah, like Simon said, we're not, risking not spending all of the money.
Thanks, Tristan. Noted. Kathleen, you're up next.
Yes, and I'm also going to echo Simon's comments, but I'd also like to add that given our experience with the workshop, I think maybe having an opportunity to come back with supplemental funding to apply for something like that to bring everybody back together again would be something that we would like to do, and possibly even work with RJ Co to be able to pull that off.
Sounds great. So what I'm hearing from the Grant Advisory Committee that I will be sure to bring up next week at the commission meeting for them to consider is with the 1.3 million and change that remains, to possibly open that up to existing programs to apply for supplemental funding, as well as new programs to apply for planning grants. Elaine had also mentioned the Grant Advisory Committee may be developing specific criteria of what you were looking for in a planning grant, very simple guardrails maybe, so that we get applications for exactly what you're looking for. Elaine, I see your hands up again.
Well, I just wanted to echo what Kathleen said. I do really appreciate the idea of using some of that funding where it makes sense to centralize some support and technical assistance out to the current and potential incoming, so that there is access to consistency and to lessons learned that the state actually provides. So if we can earmark some to build some collaboration statewide and to bring in some technical assistance support, I just think that's going to continue to make a lot of sense. And then have people showcase their work as part of that.
Thank you, Elaine. So next steps identified here on the slide. Again, I'll be talking about the decisions you all made here for authorization of funding at the commission meeting next week, June 26th, as well as the ideas proposed for that remaining funding, the potential supplemental funding round, the unallocated, going towards some new planning grant opportunities. And we'll inform current grantees of the decisions made here today, keep you all in the loop about decisions that are going to be made next week from the commission. And then we will, work with you all, whether that's developing criteria for specific planning grant opportunities. So, that could require another committee meeting to discuss that. We're going to initiate tribal consultation due to the critical event that was triggered by the unallocated funding. So I guess keep an eye on your inboxes for more emails from me and Avery. Are there any questions for me at this time? All right, thank you, committee members, for your time today. I really appreciate it, and I hope that your week is off to a good start. I'll be in touch.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.